Hello everyone. Today we're going to learn about one of the greatest artists of the Italian Renaissance, and that man is Michelangelo. At some point in your life, you must have heard someone talk about Michelangelo and his numerous paintings, sculptures, and architecture. He's most famously known for his most famous work, the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel in Vatican City. To this very day, Michelangelo's name remains the most prominent in human history. Throughout this video, we are going to learn how the main components of the Renaissance, individualism, humanism, and secularism, were represented through the life and work of Michelangelo.
Michelangelo di Ludovico Simoni was born on 6 March 1475. His father was a descendant of the noble family of the Counts of Canossa. His family returned back to Florence a few weeks after his birth. The city of Florence was at that time the greatest center of the arts and learning in Italy. Art was sponsored by wealthy patrons such as the Medici and their banking associates. This child became one of the most prominent and popular artists of the Renaissance. He was talented to the extent that he grabbed the attention of the ruler of Florence himself, Lorenzo de' Medici. He invited Michelangelo to live in the Medici household. Michelangelo created the Battle of the Centaurs sculpture during his stay in the Medici household. He stayed for 2 years until the death of Lorenzo de' Medici. This unfinished sculpture portrays a Greek mythology and represents the art in ancient Greece. Yes, it might be unfinished, but still significant, and Michelangelo himself considered it as one of the best of his early works. He succeeded to revive the art of ancient Greece.
Of course, it can be argued that the Renaissance occurred all over Europe. However, today we're going to discuss the regions where it was most significant, which is in northern Italy, or more specifically, Florence. The small city-state at the time was a merchant city, which meant trade, money, and prosperity. This gave it the perfect opportunity to be a haven for every painter, sculptor, or artist in general, since it was one of the few who were actually capable of financing as well as maintaining such a level of cultural development, such as restoring ancient textbooks, scripts, as well as financing and supporting the artists themselves. So the main idea of the Renaissance is that after a long period of intellectual and cultural darkness, northern Italians recognized that they were living in a new golden age, also known as the Renaissance, derived from the same French word renaissance, meaning rebirth, basically meaning that they were to continue the glorious days of ancient Rome. This led to the major development of humanism, which, to be simplified, is the emphasis on humans, their nature, achievements, and capabilities, rather than spiritual matters or entities. This rise in humanism is what led to the sudden strong interest in ancient artifacts. Michelangelo's work can be easily compared to ancient technique and style, as it is very similar in matters of detail orientation. This reflection of ancient art can easily be seen through countless works of the Renaissance and Michelangelo. When we look at buildings, sculptures, and paintings of the time, it all looks so reminiscent of ancient Roman Greek architecture, sculptures, and art. We can observe the Greek columns and pediments, as well as the Roman-inspired arches and domes. One can easily misidentify a Renaissance art piece with an ancient masterpiece. For example, after having finished his Cupid sculpture, Baldassare del Milanese and Pier Francesco stated, "If you buried it, I'm convinced it would pass as an ancient work."
Secularism was a prominent aspect of the Renaissance. It is the separation of the state from religious institutions. However, Michelangelo's works seem to be religious, as most of his work was appointed by the popes of the churches. But when it comes to the real world, they take it with a different perspective. It was not all about religion. People of the Renaissance focused more on the acquisition of material things. Popes of the Renaissance expended huge amounts of money to beautify their city. They took the attitude of worldly people rather than spiritual people. Michelangelo was one of the most popular spiritual artists at that time, but in reality, it was not only for the sake of religion, but also for money, popularity, and getting more sophisticated.
Michelangelo introduced new methods and styles of art, especially relating to humanism, which was a major Renaissance theme. His nude depictions of the human body in the Sistine Chapel shocked people when it was done, as they had never seen it depicted in art before. It also became controversial after his death. In 1564, the Council of Trent demanded that the nude depictions in the Sistine Chapel be made more decent, and they hired artist Daniel da Volterra to paint underwear over the bodies.
So one of the main themes that can be easily observed throughout the Renaissance is individualism. This rising phenomenon is recognized as the idea that human potential has no boundaries. Artists everywhere did not hesitate to show their talent and had full confidence in their capabilities. The idea of the individual was a key concept to better understanding of the Renaissance. It is one of the earliest traces of what today we consider the modern notion of personal identity. This can be seen through many works of Michelangelo, such as in David, which represented a classicized ideal of a man. Michelangelo was many things. He was great, legendary, talented. He was anything but modest about his image. Michelangelo was very self-aware of his talent and uniqueness at the time. In fact, he was such an incredibly proud person that he used to burn many of his sketches of his masterpieces as a way to conceal the amount of effort he actually put into them. Giorgio Vasari stated that Michelangelo feared that he might otherwise seem less than perfect. During his lifetime, others only insisted on this idea. Many even considered him as a divine being. Michelangelo was the first person to have their own biography while they were still alive, by none other than Vasari himself, who countlessly stated how Michelangelo was so talented that certainly anyone who sees his works considers them something divine rather than human. But before we start believing in everything Giorgio Vasari states in his book, one must also keep in mind this relevant piece of information. Not only were Michelangelo and Vasari friends for a very long time, but in fact, Vasari actually worked for Michelangelo for a significant period of time. No wonder he keeps on asserting his divinity all the time.
Michelangelo was so important to the Renaissance and set himself apart from other artists at the time because his style of art captured what the Renaissance was all about. Major themes of the Renaissance include individualism and humanism, and Michelangelo was able to express this through his art. For example, amongst his most famous sculptures are David and La Pieta. These sculptures both represented humanism because they were realistic and depicted scenes of real human emotion which ranged from sorrow to pondering. In an individualistic sense, Michelangelo was able to maximize his potentials through his art, and he had confidence to go above and beyond the norm. Furthermore, it was the opinion of many during his time that he was considered to be more skilled than any other modern sculptor who had ever worked up until that time. He inspired artists after him to be like him in regards to style and technique. His legacy both before and after death was so high that it allowed people at his time to see artists in a different, more respected light. During his lifetime, people were even terrified of his works because they were so unaccustomed to such great art. It is his vast legacy that results from his talent as well as his connections with the major Renaissance themes that set him apart from other Renaissance artists. It is written by Giorgio Vasari. No sculptor, not even the most rare artist, could ever reach this level of design and grace, nor could he, even with hard work, ever finish, polish, and cut the marble as skillfully as Michelangelo did.